And I'd like to welcome everyone to this town hall, CIMAC Town Hall, about the MEPC84 meeting. Today with Leo Buricin, our IMO coordinator and speaker of this town hall today, you will learn about the key outcomes in the IMO Net Zero Framework, what took place in the last week and especially also in the week before. 2 weeks being very active and very constructive discussions, I think I can say that, taking place at the IMO in London. And Leo will give you all the facts which are aligned with the MEPC 84 and the Net Zero Framework. But Leo, as he was there in the actual meetings, he can also give you some insights which you probably do not read everywhere in the reports from other organizations. So that live webinar is definitely worth it to follow. And obviously the main focus of today's webinar will be about the topics around Net Zero Framework and what was decided or not decided there and how the future plan is around the NZF. But at the end of the presentation, you will also learn a few things about the topics around URN, underwater radiated noises, and onboard carbon capture and storage, OCCS, and a few other things that took also place at MEPC. So there was quite a lengthy agenda with several topics relevant to the CIMAC community. But obviously, Net Zero Framework is the largest topic in that sense. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Leo, and you start the presentation. And we will obviously start with the Net Zero Framework and the discussions around that. And after that part of the presentation, we will stop for a couple of minutes for questions and discussions. You have the chance to type in questions either in the chat or when you see on the top right screen of your screen, you will see a question mark where you can type in questions, and we will pick them up at the end of the presentation chapter around NZF and these outcomes. Yeah, so welcome everybody, and Leo, now you can start. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, and good day to everyone. So today I will present, as Daniel has said, the main outcomes from the MEPC 84, the meeting that took place from the 27th of April to the 1st of May. The main focus of the presentation will be the advancement of the talks related to the NZF, together with the technical work stream supporting the future implementation, basically the guidelines that have been discussed the week prior to that during the intersessional working group. As many of you already know, the expectation before the MEPC 84 were to restart the talks, and what the meeting actually wanted to achieve was to be a reset session, to resume discussion, to clarify the position, and to continue with the technical work. But of course, those two things, so the NZF and the guidelines, were not the only topics of the meeting. Important outcomes has also been achieved in areas such as ballast water management, the emission control areas, energy efficiency, as Daniel said before, underwater radiated noise, and others to which I'll come back a little bit later. So although many headlines focused on the political deadlock around the NZF, the IMO environmental agenda continued to move forward. So moving directly to the NZF, I wanted to start a little bit with where we have left it off last time that we talked. It was actually we had our town hall after the extraordinary MEPC and the intersessional, both that took place in October, meetings where we were supposed to adopt the NZF, but we ended up having an adjournment of the vote by 1 year. Back then, the earliest entry into force, given the postponement, was March 2028, but we will see a bit later on that having the timeline adapted a little bit. This has also shifted. And in the meanwhile, we have had 2 meetings, which I have just mentioned before. So the intersessional working group on the reduction of GHG emission, and after that, the MEPC84, both in the last 2 weeks of April. So the NZF as such was designed to support the IMO 2023 GHG strategy and the objective of the net zero GHG emission for international shipping to achieve that by or around 2050. After MEPC 83, so going back in April last year, expectations were that the framework would be formally adopted during the extraordinary that took place in October last year, but we know that these have changed, and we are now in a different position at the moment, and I will be coming back to that very soon. So since then, as I said, we have had those 2 weeks to advance the work on the guidelines with the aim to try to reach a consensus on the overall NZF framework. So the mandate of the first week of the intersessional was mainly technical. The group focused on developing draft guidelines and implementation tools that were related to the NZF, but without getting into the political discussion. The week after, during MEPC, you can see here the agenda. Of course, there was more than just the NZF discussion, but when we talk about the NZF at the MEPC 84, the discussions were mostly political. There was talks about how to move forward and of how to structure the discussion that we are going to be having. Now, going to the topic on the NZF itself and how it was dealt at the MEPC 84, compared to the extraordinary session in October last year, we can definitely say that the atmosphere now in April was different. It was more IMO-like, so basically more in line with the meetings that we're usually used to see at the IMO. Also, many delegations have described the meeting being more constructive and more open, and several factors have contributed to this. So first of all, the meeting was, of course, preceded, as I said, by the intersessional working group, which helped continue technical discussion and reduce the uncertainty. At least this is the impression that we got out of it. Secondly, delegations also appeared to be more willing to re-engage after the adjournment vote that we have had in October in further discuss and try to find a consensus. What has been emphasized very clearly from both sides, when I say both sides, I mean the ones approving or supporting the NZF as it is, and the one that wants to changes, there was a clear signal to work together and to further progress on this. Additionally, there were a number of additional submissions that have been submitting before the meeting, and this included alternative proposals, compromise ideas, proposed amendments, and also technical clarifications. And as you have probably read and seen, there was quite a high number of participants. I think that it was said that there was over 100 delegations of member states. One of the most important outcomes from the MEPC 84 is therefore not a formal regulatory decision, but rather the reestablishment of dialogue. And it has been also repeatedly emphasized by the Secretary General that rebuilding trust and maintaining the momentum would be and is essential for going forward. However, I think that it can be said without many doubts that despite the constructive atmosphere, that the positions remain fundamentally divided, and that the core disagreement that we have seen in October 2025 were still and are still not resolved. Now, moving to the positioning, getting a little bit more deeper into the matter, there was quite a clear political positioning that became visible during the meeting. So on one side, there were the strong supporters of the existing IMO Net Zero Framework, so to have it as is. These delegations, of course, they have argued that the framework already represented a carefully negotiated compromise, said also a compromise of already a compromise, that it is aligned with the 2023 IMO GHG strategy, and that reopening the architecture could undermine the environmental ambition and the investors' confidence. So on the line of these arguments, the supporters on the NZF, of course, are stressing that technical and economic elements are an indivisible package, that a global framework is needed to avoid regional fragmentation, something that is quite important also for our industry, and the delays could discourage those who have already invested in the alternative fuels and technologies, and we see that this is something that is already happening. On the other side, we had those delegations supporting what became now known, or what we call the market readiness approach. And they basically argue that fuel availability remains insufficient, that the infrastructure is not ready, at least not everywhere, that cost may be excessive, and that implementation could disproportionately affect developed countries and those that are very much dependent on trade. So they have an approach of revisiting the framework, have also some argue to have substantial changes, remove completely the economic measures. So the positions are quite different. Some also have questioned whether shipping should effectively be pushed toward fuels that are yet not commercially scalable, in their opinion. So as a result, the session did not reach the consensus that was required for adoption. Again, this is important because the IMO traditionally operates through consensus rather than the voting, as we have seen in October, and to where has such a vote led us. Just maybe as an information, although there was no vote at this session regarding the NZF, there was a vote on a motion for resolution condemning Iran. So the delegation of Iran has asked for a roll call vote to have the text that was condemning the country to be removed, but that didn't go through. So the political challenges, therefore, remains substantial also after this meeting and has not been solved. Moving to the discussions and to get a little bit more into it, what did we discuss concretely? So discussions were extensive and at times also difficult. We have had a full day on Thursday where mostly member states have taken the floor and addressing what were their opinions or what were their stance on with regard to the NZF as it is, but also towards the proposals that have been submitting. So really a significant amount of time was also spent on discussing how the process itself should continue. And here, the questions that have been asked and the topic that have been dealt with, where should the current framework remain the basis for negotiations? So the proposal that have been approved in April last year, should alternative approaches be considered equally, as we know that there is a strong force pushing for that, for a different approach, and those proposals has also been submitted for the attention of the committee. Then should extraordinary session be resumed, and when? But also should the timeline of the overall adoption procedure, whether it should be extended, given that at the moment we do not have the consensus that is needed. Also, the meeting overran normal meeting hours because of the intensity of the discussions. Actually, on a Friday, which is very uncommon, instead of finishing as we usually do at 5:30, the meeting went over for over an hour without interpretation. And there it has also been argued that why have such important discussions, very sensitive, very political, been left to the very end of the meeting, and why didn't we start the week discussing those important issues? Now, on the right-hand side of the slide, you see a paper, because there has been also visible efforts by some delegations to influence positions. This is a one-pager. You see on the bottom right of the picture where it comes from, by whom. It is a one-pager that has been distributed to member states with an analysis of the economic impact that the NZF would have for the countries, as well as a compliance cost projections. So this is to say that also during this meeting, although it was not as politically hot as the one in October, we still have had these kind of pressures going around. A major concern that has been raised by delegation involved, as I said before, the economic implication of the framework. And in this regard, questions have been posed about freight cost increase, impacts on food security, effects on developing economies, and as well on the commercial availability of alternative fuels. So the overall dynamic at this session was not only about environmental ambition, of course, it was also about balancing and blending in realism, investment certainty, global uniformity, and political acceptability. Now, what is the way forward, and what are we looking at, and how has the timeline changed? So the agreement that has been reached during the session was also an agreement that was not easy to get to. It has been very much a challenge in which direction to go and how to proceed. But at the very end, having a little bit felt how the room breathed, the chair have decided, based on the discussion, that how we proceed will be the following way. So we will have, first of all, two additional intersessional working group meetings. This was something that was not very much supported by all delegations. The first intersessional week that has been scheduled in September, from the 1st to the 4th, was, I would say, widely accepted. But the second one, the one scheduled in November, from the 23rd to the 27th, which will precede the MEPC85, was a little bit more contested, having the argument that delegations negotiating so close to the session that would then also possibly deal with an adoption vote would not give the necessary time to discuss the positions, but at the end, the conclusion is that also the second intersessional working group week will happen, and will, as I said, will be followed by an MEPC85 session, which will last 4 days from Monday 30th of November till the Thursday 3rd of December. And then the Friday has been left for the extraordinary session, the session that is supposed to vote on the framework. This is still uncertain whether we will come to that. It will really depend on how the work will progress in these two intersessional weeks, and then the talks that we're going to have at the MEPC. Because these meetings, all of them, as also the intersessional, will continue the work, this time not only on refining the draft guidelines, but also addressing the concerns with the overall net zero framework and with the other proposals, and as well as, of course, the work that needs still to be done with the IMO LCA framework. This means that the earliest realistic possibility for adoption would be in December 2026. And this also means that what I have showed before in the slides where we left off, that we have had a possible earliest entry into force in 2028. Now this would mean that the earliest would be in 2029. There is an additional challenge that we see that will probably also come up, that some delegations have emphasized the issue of the tacit explicit acceptance procedures, something that has been discussed widely in the session in October last year. And so the will for the one opposing it to go with the explicit, which would of course take more time and would very likely postpone the entry into force. So overall, the IMO had not abandoned the concept. All proposals on the table are being taken forward and will be discussed. But what has been done for the moment, instead of getting into a political impasse, the committee has decided to continue to discuss on it intersessionally, even the political aspects of it. Now, what to expect? Looking ahead, the first thing that we see is that uncertainty remains high, and several important points should be highlighted. So, first of all, alternative proposals, the one that suggests something different compared to what we have right now and what has been approved in April 2025, those proposals are on the table. So the current NZF draft, as we know it, is no longer the only possibility or the only possible pathway. Everything that has been submitted will be brought forward to the intersessional to be discussed. Not only new proposals are still possible and can still be submitted and will also be taken on board in the discussions that are to come. This means basically that negotiation, apart from still being difficult, will remain also fluid. And the third thing that is worth mentioning is that regional fragmentation risks to increase. Because if the IMO process continue to slow down, regional measures are likely to be strengthened. We see that there are new such regional measures coming up, that the one in the UK is about to be implemented. So, and this is something that creates concerns for the industry, because fragmented regulation increases the risk, or not only the risk, but increases the administrative complexity, the compliance cost, as well as operational uncertainty. Another issue that we are expecting is the issue of procedural uncertainty, because there is still no guarantee that the resumed extraordinary session scheduled for one day will proceed directly to the adoption. As I said before, we have to see. It is possible that additional negotiations will continue, that the timeline will slip further, or that some other kind of voting will be put forward. So overall, we can say that for the short period, for the time to come, that our industry do face a prolonged uncertainty, because given the current state, given the proposals that are on the table, and how delegations of member states reacted to them, it is difficult to see, at least difficult to see, to have the NZF approved as is. So it will be interesting to see how the talks will evolve. Here I have put a little bit an overview of important statements, at least for us. The first one is the one that I wanted to highlight, is the one from the Secretary General of the IMO, Arsenio Dominguez, who said that we are back on track, but that we have to rebuild trust. And this is very, very true, because although there is a positive sign, meaning that the talks continue, trust needs to be rebuilt, and it's going to be a set of tough negotiations in front of us. Then we have the Commission statement, European Commission on behalf of the EU, that stressed a positive outcome of the MEPC meeting, and that encourages all parties to work together for the adoption of an ambitious global framework. It is true that the Commission has said in several instances that the EU is ready to lift our measures in favor of an international agreement of the NZF, if that would have to be reached, but it didn't really say explicitly how would do it, how we will take away our measures, and what will be the process. And this is something that has been argued, especially by the one opposing the framework, that clarity here is missing. On the other side, we know a very well opposer of the NZF, the US, who have stated that they have managed to fracture the support for the NZF, the global carbon tax, as they call it, for the sake of protecting American economic interests. So as you see, the position and the stance around it still stay very polarized. But now, going a little bit more into the technical details and what have happened during the intersessional, where technical guidelines has been progressed. So the overall objective of this work of the week prior to the MEPC was to support the consistent and effective implementation of the future framework through guidelines. So importantly, the meeting repeatedly clarified, and it has been something now very common in intersessional meetings, that all the discussion that was happening there did not prejudge anything regarding the future MARPOL amendments to the Annex 6, meaning no prejudgment towards the NZF. The work that took place during the intersessional week was structured into two major agenda items. The first one was the one related to the overall GFI calculation, the fuel certification framework, the GFI registry, the ZNZ, so the zero net zero emission fuels, and their rewards, and the net zero fund. And then the second agenda item was the one related to the LCA framework, where we will see shortly. And an important point also to mention here, that the agenda was also supposed to include the fifth IMO GHG study, but given time constraints and how extensive the discussion of on these two first agenda items were, we didn't manage to get into it. Now, moving to the GFI calculation guidelines, the goal here is to establish a standardized methodology for calculating and verifying ship GHG performance. The first thing worth mentioning is that a consolidated draft guideline document was developed, bringing together the different technical discussions into a more structured framework. So we relate with relation to that, the first important topic that has been considered and that is now to be taken forward in the discussion on the GFI is the conservative conversion factors for zero emission energy sources and for shore power. Here, the IMO is taking a cautious approach to avoid over-crediting technologies before actually a robust verification system is fully established. So here, the discussion still continues. It is not concluded. There has been also some advancement with the wind propulsion that has also been progressed further within the GFI framework. Discussion here included development of an additional tier 3 methodology for wind spectrum correction, aiming to better quantify the actual energy contribution from wind-assisted propulsion systems. Another topic that was quite discussed and that came around during the MEPC, not only during the intersessional, was the onboard carbon capture and storage, the OCCS. This has been discussed. It has been included in the future discussion on the GFI, but this requires further discussion. This is significant because it confirms that the IMO sees carbon capture as a possible further compliance pathway. However, the work still needs to be done on emission accounting, on certification, on monitoring, and also on the alignment with the overall life cycle assessment rules. Another important thing that you have probably read, it has been out in different reports, is that the proposed Z&Z energy multiplier has been excluded, so was not supported within the GFI calculation itself. This because the main concerns were market distortion, additional complexity, and reduced transparency. So here, what has been decided is actually to talk about the multiplier and to get into the discussion in the section or in the part that deals with Z&Z rewards. And finally, two more additional topics. One that regards ICE class vessels that have seen some positive discussions and will continue to be discussed. And the nuclear has been acknowledged, but no prioritization for the moment, also because we know that the nuclear code has been now under revision. Moving to the sustainable fuel certification scheme, the objective here is to establish a global system for certifying sustainable marine fuels under the hopefully future framework, however it will look like. It is important because future compliance will depend not only on the fuels that are used on board, but also on the life cycle emissions and traceability of the fuel across the supply chain. One of the main debates here during the intersessional was how the certification system actually should be, how do we apply for that? So there were mainly two proposals, either through direct application at the IMO level or to have a strong involvement and oversight from member states. What have been decided decided or endorsed rather for future discussion is to have a kind of compromise. So to have a direct application of the certification scheme that is combined with a member state support letter, and to go further on with this approach. Further work here is still needed on several governance issues, particularly on revocation rule, which would only apply in exceptional cases, and ensuring that is really a transparent oversight of the system. Also, there has been a proposal to have an SFCS assessment group, which would be rather a technical advisory board than a decision-making body. So helping to review and assess certification-related matters. There was also discussion regarding reporting requirements, and here the main challenges is actually to find balance between detailed internal certification data and aggregating reporting at the IMO level. So also in all of these areas and in overall in the FCSF area, the topics still need to be furthered, progressed, and discussed. When we talk about the IMO GFI register, this is, as you know, the central digital system under the future framework. The purpose here is to track ship GFI performance and support future compliance monitoring. Even though the registry has not been adopted yet, the IMO Secretariat has already started technical preparation work, particularly with several areas that have been identified that needs further development. And here, I mean, integration with the existing IMO data collection system, of course, the topics of cybersecurity and data governance, as well as ensuring global accessibility for all member states. An important debate was the one that related to the fee. So we had a delegation that supported a tiered fee system as fair for smaller ships on the vessels, while others preferred for a flat fee approach, which would boost simplicity. Here again, no decision was taken, mostly because it was said that it was again premature to discuss without having the amendments to the MARPL Annex 6 approved. With regard to the zero and near zero emissions fuels, here there was a broad support for a technology neutral approach, something that has been reiterated several times, meaning that the framework should avoid favorizing any specific fuel or technology. The discussion also supported using avoided well-to-wake emissions as the basis for the evaluation of ZNZ's performance. We have talked also that it is important, and what should be taken forward, or the approach that is needed, was a modular and phased approach to developing the guidelines, recognizing that different technologies may require different methodologies. And of course, again, here, an area of a strong debate was the one that involved the future reward mechanism. And here discussion concentrated on sustainability criteria, cost effectiveness, and ensuring accessibility for developing countries. The main concepts that were discussed here was one, an IMO set fixed reward system, which could provide greater stability and predictability for investment decisions, at least and especially in the short term. And the other one was a reverse auction mechanism, which could improve cost efficiency by allowing market competition. We know that no final model has been selected, and here the work will continue at the upcoming sessions. Last point on the agenda, item 2 on guidelines. Was the Net Zero Fund, which is probably the most politically challenging area, and here major focus of the discussion was the concept of just and equitable transition. Delegation emphasized that the transitions should not disproportionately impact developing countries or the trade-dependent economies. Here, there was a big divergence on how the revenue allocation would look like, concerns about food security, and as I said, also on this point, no concrete agreement. Moving now to the agenda item 2 that was discussed during the intersessional working group week, which was the one related to the IMO life cycle GHG assessment framework. So here, when it comes to the well-to-tank calculation methodologies, 3 main things have been discussed. The first one were avoided emissions, and there was no agreement on whether or how avoided emissions should be incorporated into the IMO LCA framework. So the issue has been referred to the GESAMP LCA working group. The same goes for the embodied emissions. There was a clear signal that no obligation was needed, and the further methodological development here is required, because the GESAMP recommended that any proposal excluding embodied emission from default factors should be properly justified, and this has found no support. And the last thing was the ships using cargo as fuel. Again, a matter remains technically unclear, as it has been argued that the current 2024 LCA guidelines do not adequately reflect the reduced upstream emission in these cases. On the tank to wake calculation methodology, here further work is needed on OCCS emissions, methane slip values, and CCU accounting. And finally, sustainability themes and aspects became another very important aspect of the discussions, but even here, further work is needed. And the last slide to conclude on this topic before we stop shortly is that on default emission factors, the current methodology is retained, but discussion continue on improving transparency, including the possible future inclusion of country of origin information. There was no agreement on establishing a single global LNG default value, because emissions can vary significantly depending on production pathway and supply chain. On the topic of actual values and traceability, here the view remained mixed regarding the use of ISO LCA standards. So also this one remains under revision. And maybe the last thing to note is that additional fuel pathway codes will be under consideration, and those are intermediate corn ethanol and LNG with upstream CCS. So overall, as a conclusion, the majority of the outcomes are that the draft text need further work. There is the need for technical referrals, and there are still unresolved issues that need to be tackled, which have of course reflected the situation in the overall negotiation, which are high complexity, political sensitive, and there's still a very early stage of the IMO and ZDF. So I'll stop here for the moment and give back the floor to Daniel.
Yes, thank you very much, Leo, for this very exhaustive presentation about the things happening in the past 2 weeks. I think you elaborated really to 100% and reported to 100% what was happening. I see one question now coming out of the Q&A function. David Young is asking, what was the most significant about inclusion of OCCS? So I think OCCS we'll talk a little bit later again. But,
yes, we talk about it a bit later, so maybe we can leave it for yeah, we can go back to it in a moment.
Yeah, exactly. So there will be a little more, much shorter presentation coming in the next minute about URN and OCCS. Yeah, I guess I don't see any other questions coming in. I think you can continue with the presentation. If there's questions coming in a minute about MEPC, NZF, and these kind of things, we can still answer them. So, yeah, I think for the moment, we can continue. Yep.
Yeah, let's move forward. So another topic that is that has been on the agenda of the MEPC and that is very close to our CIMAC community. As you know, we also have a working group 22, that deals directly with the issue of underwater radiated noise. And the discussion during MEPC have followed what have been the discussion at the SDC committee earlier in January this year. So what the MEPC has approved or endorsed, first of all, the experience building phase as requested by the SDC has been extended by 2 years. So it moves now up to 2028. But I think that the most important outcome is probably that we proceed with an IMO URN policy roadmap. And this means that submissions for the MEPC85, when the URN topic will be on the agenda, are welcome. So submission related to policy roadmap. Here, just to mention that probably as CIMAC, we will have a submission on that topic. The working group 22 is working on that. So let's see how this evolves. But again, something quite close to the activities and the work that we do at the IMO. Further, again, as a result or coming out of the SDC was the finalization of the draft MEPC circular on the technical guidance of co-optimizing energy efficiency and underwater radiated noise. This has been worked during the SDC meeting, having also our CIMAC expert participating. So this has been now finalized. One last thing is that since the URN topic will be on the agenda of the MEPC and it is becoming now, it's moving forward into policy consideration, there will be also a working group that will be established and that will go on in parallel to the MEPC meeting itself. And lastly, given all these conclusions, this means that the URN remains a formal IMO workstream in the activities to come. Now, coming to the onboard carbon capture and the storage, it has also been covered by the MEPC. And actually, the session continued discussion on the regulatory framework for OCCS, with discussion focusing mostly on testing, monitoring, and emission accounting. The IMO is taking a gradual and technology neutral approach here, recognizing that additional technical work is still needed before OCCS could become part of a fully operational compliance framework. Here, the work will continue through the reestablishment of a correspondence group. Our CIMAC community will be also invited to join the correspondence group and to keep on working at the IMO on the development of this area. And the correspondence group will particularly focus on measurement and verification methodologies, needed alignment with the 2024 LCA guidelines and the broader technical framework development. What has been excluded from the working group terms of reference is the CO2 accounting itself. as its scope will require further discussion to be taken out separately. Also, additional technical work will continue regarding methane and nitrous oxide emissions measurement and reporting for marine engines. So the work overall on the OCCS continues, and for the moment it continues through the correspondence group. And last slide for today to cover the other major outcome and that are worth noting. Sorry, something has happened here. I'll just go to the last slide. Yeah, so although most of the attention, as I have said, have focused on the NZF, the committee has also achieved several important and concrete regulatory outcomes. First of all, one of the major development was the approval of the Northeast Atlantic emission control area for nitrogen oxide, for NOx, and the sulfur oxide, as well as for particulate matter. The new ECA, the new emission control area, will enter into force next year, starting from September 1st, and will apply across a large area, including parts of the North Atlantic and the surrounding coastal areas. Another significant outcome was the one related to the amendments of the Ballast Water Management Convention. Here, the focus is now shifting from simply having a ballast water treatment system installed on board and rather going towards demonstrating that the system is actually operating correctly in practice. This means bigger emphasis on operational compliance, on maintenance verification, and on compliance with the D2 discharge standards. Furthermore, the MEPC also approved the amendments to the NOx technical code to support the certification of engines operating on non-carbon fuels and mixed fuels, and this includes also ammonia-fueled engines. And this is important, an important step, because engine certification framework must evolve together with the transition toward alternative fuels. And finally, the discussion also continued on strengthening the IMO's existing short-term GHG reduction and ship energy efficiency measures. And here, the main things to emphasize is the updated energy efficiency design index guidance for dual and hybrid vessels, proposed improvement of the ship energy efficiency management plan implementation and auditing, and to continue with the review of the carbon intensity indicator methodologies, particularly regarding weather correction and cruise ship operation. So overall, if we are to sum up the outcomes of the MEPC84, the NZF discussion remain unresolved. We have gone through it quite in detail, but anyway, the committee still managed to deliver meaningful progress across several environmental and technical work streams. So with this, I will close here from my side. I thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, we are at disposal. And Daniel, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Leo. I believe the question from David Young about OCCS has been answered, but if not, David, please ask more in detail what you need to know more. There was or is another question coming in from Marinus Janssen from DNV. And the question is, can you elaborate on the food-related concerns? Do these relate to suitable biogenic feedstock sources? I believe this question is in relation to the topic of biofuels and biofuels production, that biofuels is kind of in a competition to food production. That's what I believe. That's how I interpreted it. I don't know, Leo, do you have anything?
Yes. This is also a recurring discussion, partially in what you have said, to see also which feedstocks. So there is no particular agreement for the moment. And when it comes to biofuels, the discussion still continues. Also, now seeing the proposal that have been submitted, I'm sure that this topic will be further developed in the upcoming intersessional working groups meetings.
All right. There's another addition from Marinos. Bio BT, especially power and biomass to liquid processes. But I think then we understood the question right, and you answered it right. I believe that was.
Yeah, but if there is a, I mean, we can also have a reply by email if there is more details that are needed. Happy to do so.
Yeah, good idea. I copy Marino's email address
Yes.
and send it to you, Leo, and then you can,
of course,
get in touch.
We can reach out. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, thank you, Leo, for this presentation. I think that was very valuable to see and to listen and to learn what happened in the past 2 weeks. A lot going on, obviously, but I think everybody was aware of that. But I also appreciate the details about this one paper you were mentioning and about the climate of the discussions. And I think these insights from a person who was actually in the room is very valuable. This is something you cannot read in a report from some company, let's say this way, or from a news agency or these kind of things. Appreciate that. Thank you very much for you, Leo, for all the efforts you're taking for preparing this presentation here as well. And with that, I think we are closing the town hall for now. Can you tell us when the next town hall is taking place and about what?
Well, the next town hall is about the MSC meeting, which is scheduled to start next week on Wednesday, and the town hall, if I'm not mistaken, we should have it on the 29th of May.
Absolutely, that's what I
we
have
will
in mind
circulate the information, of course, and invitation.
Yeah, exactly. We circulate the invitation, and I also recommend to register for our newsletter. There you will also find up-to-date information every other month. And I guess the most information is coming via our LinkedIn channel. So if you look up LinkedIn for the CIMAC page and follow us on LinkedIn, you will also get all the up-to-date information. Yeah, once again, thank you, Leo. Everybody coming to this event, thank you for your interest in the topics we are presenting here. And I wish you a great Friday and a happy weekend. And then we will meet again in 3 weeks' time when the next town hall about MSC is taking place, and looking forward to the outcomes and learnings out of this committee meeting. Thank you and goodbye.
Bye.